Meghan contaminates listeners' ears about past grievances. Half the podcast is unclean. Hello friends, welcome to the remarkable news of the notorious hypocrite Meghan Markle on our Kate Middleton and the Queen News version 2 channel. It was hardly surprising that Meghan invited tennis superstar Serena Williams to be the first guest on her long-awaited podcast series titled Archetypes. It was high time that the £18 million deal with Spotify that was signed way back in 2020 finally launched. And naturally, the first episode, entitled The Misconception of Ambition, had to be a cracker. And for sure, the potential was there for two high-profile women to do as billed, to dig into the labels that tried to hold women back. Now, Serena is by far one of the most successful and fearless players in the history of tennis, so I was actually pretty excited to hear her analyze her ambition and her desire to win, and talk about the personal cost of her amazing triumphs. I wanted to find out what originally put the steel in her spine, and I wanted to hear her serve up some devastating backhand shots against male putdowns. But sadly, that definitely didn't happen. It was just bizarre, it was sugary, and it was faintly queasy. It was a schmooze fest between Meghan and Serena. She called her my dear friend Serena again and again. And it told us nothing at all about the making of Serena's towering ambition. And the whole thing ended with Serena saying, "Above all, I'm just a mom and I love being a mom." I wish somebody would just teach the two of them how to stop their inane gushing and just talk tough about what really matters. So let me be clear, Meghan's series is about a subject that's really close to my heart, and I was hoping I would be impressed. I read recently about all the abuse that Tory leadership contender Liz Truss has had to deal with recently, and I can see how a woman who shows ambition in politics or really any other area often is smeared as strident and or stupid. It can be very difficult to put up with. So the idea of a podcast series, which is going to reach a big audience because of Meghan's fame, taking down the prejudice and smashing what she refers to as the double standards women face when labeled ambitious, yeah, that certainly did appeal to me. But from the very start, the warning bells started to ring loudly. This podcast is just another example of the inescapable truth that the UK and the US are two countries that are divided by a common language. No British broadcaster is going to sanction the almost incomprehensible giggling and the gushing between Meghan and Serena. It excludes the listener from any real comprehension or intimacy. So I was waiting for sensitive, searching questions about Serena's upbringing and her legendary father Richard's influence on her. I was wanting to know if she was encouraged to be competitive against her sister. Was the ambition that was pushed on her from childhood something that ended up weighing heavily on her? How interesting her thoughts on that would have been if we'd gotten to hear them. But 11 whole minutes go by before we get to hear a word from the former world #1 and the holder of 23 Grand Slam titles. Instead, we get to hear a long preamble from Meghan, who makes it abundantly clear that this podcast series is not only about distinguished guests, but it's also about me too. I'll be talking to household names, experts, and cultural commentators. And of course, here there's a knowing chuckle from Meghan. I know a thing or two about those labels myself. She goes on to say, "I hope that my own lived experience will help other women open up, to reveal the truth that none of us are alone in this world, and the future is something we get to write together." Seriously, I think it would take an angel not to scoff at that, because one very wealthy woman talking to another very wealthy woman is not going to do much to help a single mother who is just struggling to raise her kids in downtown LA. And how could we forget about that baby shower? How could we forget that when a pregnant Meghan flew all the way to New York in February of 2019 for that glittering event that was hosted by Serena Williams, who allegedly footed the bill too? So it was held in the $75,000 a night penthouse of the Mark Hotel on Manhattan's Upper East Side. So do these women really believe that their lived experience is relevant at all to the lives of normal, ordinary women? She did not treat that podcast interview seriously. She referred to it as a chat, and Meghan just used it as a vehicle to air her old grievances. It was the sort of gossipy headline-making stuff that's going to make the Spotify people sigh with relief that their investment has finally delivered. Take, for example, Meghan's claim that she's never been made to feel that ambition was a negative thing, until she says, "I started dating my now husband." Once she had her foot inside the palace door, she understood that ambition is a terrible, terrible thing according to some. Well, clearly, she never gave a second thought to what ambition might mean to the royal family. I mean, how could Meghan even begin to understand how the Queen's service her whole life to the country makes the word ambition actually an embarrassing irrelevance? And I think the most painful moment for me, and definitely the saddest, is Harry's walk-on role. Since the podcast couldn't happen if Meghan had not married Harry, then of course he had to pop his head around the door. And they gotta earn that money somehow. "Oh, look who's just popped in," says Meghan. "You want to come say hi?" So then she and Serena adopt these mocking fake British accents to the chorus, "Hello." And then Harry, who as a young prince and a soldier was so brave, so natural, and really refreshing, just fun, he says to Serena, "I like what you've done with your hair. That's a good vibe." Oh, goodness. It was just such a missed opportunity. It could have been a revealing discussion between some smart and opinionated women about why it is that girls raise their hands in class less as they get older and women get stereotyped as being too emotional. Both of these things are true. But instead of talking about that, we got some giggles and some mutual stroking of egos at every single opportunity. So when Serena makes the observation that male tennis stars have always gotten away with outbursts on court, Meghan just jumps in saying, the double standard. And look, there's something that happens in being archetyped that's really dehumanizing. And I think of that from my personal standpoint of being there in the box with, your mom and your sister, and like watching you win. And at the same time, watching the pressure. I find it traumatizing, too, to go back to that moment where I feel you were treated so unfairly and it was reported so unfairly. What is she talking about other than herself? Again. Now, to be fair, Serena does try with a pretty long and interesting anecdote about how her daughter Olympia fell out of her high chair and broke her wrist, and she felt incredibly guilty to have been the one in charge and the one to have allowed it to happen, and how she got barely any sleep, but she still had to play tennis early the next morning, and she ended up winning the match. See, that was some pretty good content, but then Meghan had to ruin everything. She had to one-up Serena with this revelation about a royal tour to South Africa back in 2019. So she claims that she and Harry had a public engagement, and baby Archie was there at their accommodation, and a fire broke out in the nursery where he would have been sleeping if he had not been elsewhere with a devoted nanny, and she said that everyone was in tears. "And what do we have to do?" asks Meghan. "Go out and do another official engagement." I said, "This doesn't make any sense." Well, I would think to any public figure who understands that the show must go on, it would make a lot of sense. And let's remember that even according to her, Archie was perfectly fine. She completely lacks self-awareness in this largely anodyne chat between two women who are expressing some pretty simple sentiments and banal opinions. What we got a lot of, though, was the overweening self-absorption of its real subject, Meghan. And it's a real shame that nobody told Meghan that she mixed up the word archetype, which means a very typical example of a person or thing, with stereotype, which means a popular, simplified image or a generalized expectation. So let me be the one to help out. For example, Queen Elizabeth II is an archetype of disciplined, determined duty, which is exactly why most of the world respects her so much. But Meghan didn't want to talk about the worthy topic of ambition. Instead, she spent over half of that podcast gushing about what it felt like to be pregnant, what it means to be a mother, and how brave and hard making life decisions can be for us women who are always victims. If you ask me, that's a pretty perfect illustration of what stereotyping means. And that is the biggest misconception, or maybe betrayal, of all. What do you think about Meghan using this podcast to brush up on her past grievances and force people to listen to worthy complaints? Let us know your thoughts below in the comments section. We hope you have found this video helpful. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next videos. Goodbye!